Hi, welcome to Adventures in Bonsai. Today we're going to prune a Strangler Fig. There are about 1,000 fig species around the world, and many of these are what we call Strangler Figs. Their seeds are dropped usually in the canopies of rainforests, and they are sticky and they stick to the tree, and as leaf particles blow near them, dead leaves, they use that to help them grow along with the sun and the water. And they send down very long roots which eventually get to the forest floor. In the meantime, they start to encompass the tree that they're on, which is really a host tree that holds them up. It gives them support and acts as a structure for them. And they kind of grow around the tree and down the tree, and eventually they overtake the tree and the tree inside dies, and you're just left with the Strangler Fig. This particular Strangler Fig that I have was supposed to be an oak tree. I planted an oak acorn, and the squirrels either dug it up or planted one of their own seeds in here, and this other plant started to grow, and I wasn't quite sure what it was at first, but I realized it wasn't an oak tree. And now I've got this big, nice tree. It's only about 2 years old, but they grow really big. They grow up to about 150 feet tall. They're very easy to prune and take care of. They do really well. They have great root systems. So if you can find one, it makes a nice bonsai. And we'll go take a look and see what this tree has done in just 2 years. Take a look at the thickness of the trunk and some of the roots that are trying to come off of it. And today, I recently cut this, not recently, maybe a couple months ago, cut this down because it was getting so big, and it just keeps on growing and growing and growing. The weather's not too bad here today, and I expect a week or two of decent temperatures, so I figured now's a good time to prune this tree. Let's go take a look at it. Well, even though I pruned this tree back quite a bit recently and hardly had any leaves on it, it's really come back strongly, and as you can see, it grew a lot of leaves here around the trunk, and the trunk itself is pretty nice and thick, as you can see. Some nice roots here, and even has these roots here trying to grow down to the forest floor. So today what I'm going to do is clean up the surface area here and try and get rid of all this artillery fern, and then trim the tree down and especially cut off some of this top stuff to try and keep it shorter. Okay, let's go take a look. Now what I'm going to do when I prune out this Strangler Fig stuff is I'm going to use forceps. And there's two kinds I like to use. One is one that has a spring in it, so if you put it on the piece, it holds it, and then you pull it out. Or there's another kind too you can use where you supply the pressure and then pull it out. But in the meantime, I'm just going to go and clean this up, and then we'll get back. When you're pulling out weeds, you may come to an area like this which has some bigger weeds. And a lot of times your fingers are really the easiest and fastest way to do this. The trick is not to try and pull them out too fast, because you don't want the roots to pull out the surface moss. And when you get the big ones out, what I like to do is then take my forceps that have the spring inside and just use them to cover over a bunch of them. And you don't have to pick them out individually. You can get them out as a group, and they come out pretty easily because their roots are really not established yet as weeds, and they leave the surface moss pretty much alone when you pull them out. And if you take your time and get rid of all these, and in a couple of days, you keep doing this every couple of days, you'll have a tree that has no weeds in it, which is really a nice looking tree, but you got to put a little time and effort into it. Okay, I'll be back when I'm done working on this. I did check out the sphagnum moss here, and I'll show you. As you can see, it's pretty good. There's root structures growing all around, but they're not too heavy or thick, so this is just fine. I had added some new sphagnum moss when I did cut this down, and it's grown in and taken over. These plants really do well. Now I do have these strangly roots here, and let's see what I can do with them. I'm thinking of just bringing them back and then planting them in here, and we'll have some extra roots, because if you look and see what these roots here look like, these all started out as those, and I have a whole bunch of them around here. And they're going to thicken up eventually and give it a really nice appearance. But I can also help direct some of this by taking one like this and maybe making a little hole here and putting this in and covering it up, and we'll see how it does. I decided that when I'm going to start planting these roots, I'm going to do it a little bit more properly and use a chopstick to make a hole. And then I got some sphagnum moss and wet it. And I'll use this to plug up the hole just to make these root attachments a little more secure, and hopefully they'll grow and look neat. Here's one of these roots that's up here already. I'm just going to find a spot for it. Make a little hole. Gently put it in here. Take a little piece of sphagnum moss. Stick it on top. And put it in. Now it's got a nice solid footing, and we should get a nice root over here. Alright, here's another nice long one. Now I'm just going to find a spot over here. Dig a little hole. Put this in. Take a little sphagnum moss. Gently put that in. And that should be pretty neat also. So I found a number of roots that were laying along the surface, and I just kind of picked the loose ends up and replanted them in there. I'm pretty much done for right now with the weeding aspect. There's just so many of these little tiny weeds starting to grow here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this plant out on my lanai, and every day or so I'll try and get out and pick some more of these weeds until it's totally weed free. I got rid of all the big ones. And this is a nice mental therapy for you if you want to do something like this. It's nice and relaxing to pull out those weeds one by one. So here's the back of the tree, or what I would call the back right now, because what I want to do is I want to clean up the front of it that has all this foliage covering it over and you can't see anything. So I'm going to start clipping that off right now. I'm going to use my clippers because it's easier than the scissors. And we'll start to clean this up. Okay, that was easy. I see over here I've got a nice little root that's growing around. That'll be a nice addition to that area of the trunk. And I don't know if you can see this one over here. Let's take a look at it. See this one coming down here? Right now it's just in free fall, but it's going to eventually attach itself over here and should look pretty neat. I'm going to clean up some of this other top stuff here too. So like I said, I wanted to keep this tree so it's not so tall and get rid of some of this top stuff that's growing vertically and have more laterally growing branches and leaves. So I'm just going to start cutting some of this stuff off here. Maybe I'll leave some of the lateral stuff and cut off some of the stuff that's growing upwards. These trees really do well with pruning. They really respond well to it. They grow back with thicker, denser leaf canopies. And don't be afraid to cut your ficus. They do really seem to like it and respond well to it, because in nature leaves are always being cut off by insects or rock falls or wind. And that's how the tree learns to respond. Okay, I'm going to clean this up a little bit more inside here, and we'll be back. I've decided that this area here needs to be viewed a little bit better so I can see what's going on, so I'm cutting these off too. Okay, I also have some very big leaves, and I want this tree to have smaller leaves, so I'm going to start cutting off a lot of these bigger leaves, which will make new leaves come out. And they should be smaller, and if I keep on doing this, the tree will have a nice set of smaller leaves eventually and look more in proportion to the size and shape of the trunk area. I'm also going to cut off leaves that are discolored and deformed. When I cut off these large leaves, or any leaves, I try not to cut them right back where the trunk is. I like to leave a little bit of the stem coming out. This way the stem will dry up and drop off on its own. And you don't have to worry about getting too close to the trunk. Cut off a number of the leaves that are really big, and like here's one with a little bit of problems on it at the tip, and I want to cut that off too. But what you want to be aware of when you cut any tree or any plant, when you see this white milky sap coming out, it can be very dangerous to your eyes and to your skin, so try not to touch it. And after you're done cutting trees like this, you should wash your scissors to get rid of any remnants of it so it doesn't injure or stop the growth of another plant that you later cut. Now that I've cleaned up the surface somewhat, I see that it's mostly going to be covered again in moss. So I'm going to leave a lot of it alone and just let the moss come back and take over. As you can see, there's plenty of moss here. But in some areas, like this spot right here, I'm just going to add a little gravel, just to add a little something different here. And I'll see if there's any, even where I put the moss in over here, just to put those plants in, I can fill that up a little bit too. A couple little spots with the pebbles and the gravel. This is a little interesting thing I found here. This is not a weed. This is actually the sex organs of surface moss, of the bryophytes. These are either gametophytes or archegonium, and they're kind of getting out there to get ready to spread themselves, so I'm going to leave them alone. If you do see little structures coming up from the moss with a stalk and a little oval-shaped head on it, leave them alone. Okay, they're just going to help you get a better spread of your moss. Decided to try and throw in a couple of rocks here to give this a little more interest. So I'm making a hole here with my finger. I'm going to take a rock here, put it in, and leave that one. It's pretty tight in here. The roots are really tight. I want to find a space here. Try and get another one in here. There's a little more room. Okay, it's in there pretty good. I wonder if I have room for one more. Okay, here's another spot. Push this in. Okay. Well, here's the finished plant for today. As you can see, I've cut off a lot of the leaves, and this will all grow back and look good. And I'm going to keep track on these little weeds here and try and keep them under check. And the only other thing I want to say is if you do touch the white sap, just make sure you wash your hands off with some warm soapy water. Okay, have fun with your bonsai.